Got the greatest slice of pizza in the world over here, right next to the food station that's moldy. No one's trudging through all that dirt to get to that pristine piece of pizza. The last movie in the DCEU that came out is The Blue Beetle. It was a movie I personally enjoyed, but unfortunately the box office didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I did. And that's reflective of the way that people have felt about the DCEU for quite some time now, going all the way back to the Suicide Squad. Black Adam, Shazam, The Flash all suffered the same fate, and to me, it's just like the phrase a rising tide raises all ships, but unfortunately in this case, that tide has come crashing down and has pulled every movie down with it. I mean to say that the DCEU movies have all suffered a bad reputation, whether that's from actors acting out of pocket or their own universe not defining what their universe is. Like Adam reintroduced Superman, and then not a few months later it was announced that Henry Cavill actually wouldn't be coming back as Superman. That's just one of the knee-jerk things that kept happening with the DCEU. Now we know the reason why that is because James Gunn wanted his own Superman, which is totally fine. But if you're going to keep yanking fan expectations back and forth, you're going to end up losing fans. And that's what happened with the DCEU. They kept giving fans reasons to not be invested in their product because they kept changing their mind every 5 seconds about what their product would be. Even if a movie like The Blue Beetle was good, people weren't going to go see it because they didn't feel like they had a reason to see it, because the next thing they know, the DCEU will be coming out. And now, why am I invested in this if it's all ending? And that's my fear for the upcoming Aquaman movie. People may not go see it because they may feel as though this is all ending. What's the point? It's like having a restaurant where all the food is moldy except for this one section where all the food is pristine. You got the greatest slice of pizza in the world over here, right next to the food station that's moldy. No one's trudging through all that dirt to get to that pristine piece of pizza. So let's say Aquaman flops. I really hope that it doesn't, because from the trailer it looks pretty good. If Aquaman flops, which is currently under the purview of James Gunn, even though pretty much he had nothing to do with that movie, people will still see him as the reason why it flopped. They'll say, oh, look at James Gunn's DCEU. This movie was filmed before James Gunn even really got involved. How much do you think James Gunn is actually involved in those reshoots in a movie that's not going to be a part of his next universe? So let's talk about the good and the bad and potential ugly of the new DCU, as well as kind of reflect a little bit on the DCEU. The DCEU hasn't started, so I can't judge whether or not it's going to be good or bad. It's kind of weird to me where people say, oh, it's going to suck. I don't know if it's going to suck. It could be great, or it could in fact suck. However, I kind of have a little bit of trust in James Gunn, especially when it comes to character development after watching all 3 of his Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Intricate characters and intricate stories. You're not here for my Guardians of the Galaxy review, so let's move on. You'll remember in the State of the Franchise MCU episode, I mentioned that Disney Plus shows did more harm than good to the MCU as a whole. You're asking people who have gone to the movies religiously to learn about all of these characters to now go to a streaming service to do the same thing in hopes that they'll come back with full knowledge of the MCU and the new characters. You're basically giving them homework. It was never homework before, it was just entertainment, and you just caught along the wave of what was going on in this story. So what does that have to do with James Gunn? Well, from out of his mouth, he's telling us that he's going to be doing a similar thing, but even more expanded.
Hey everybody, I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios. So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time. And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story.
I don't know why these studios believe that anyone, especially the casual fan, who only comes around every once in a while, will be able to retain all this information that these studios are giving out through 3 or 4 different mediums, connect to one connective story. It just doesn't sound wise. Maybe James Gunn will be able to do it in a way that involves the consumer and initiates them to all these characters without having to go to each one of these different mediums. But as for right now, I don't believe that that's the case. I do believe that the stories that happen outside of the movies or the TV shows are going to play a major part in what he has planned. If you're going to develop a universe, develop it in one medium. Don't spread it out like this unless the stories that you're telling in other places are so inconsequential to the main story that they don't even need to watch it. Right now, what we're seeing with the MCU is that you need to watch it. But that's not the only place where the DCU has some challenges. I know for me, if I were to have my way with the DCU, we would do a complete hard reset. We wouldn't bring anyone back from the past. We wouldn't mix them in with the new characters, except for maybe Blue Beetle, who's really nondescript and not really tied to anything that was going on before. If you're going to make a new dish, you don't want to use the leftovers from a dish that tasted bad. The DCEU, at the end of the day, tasted bad to most casual fans, which is why they bombed at the box office. There's no debating whether or not these movies were successful. They were not. And what I'm not saying is that a movie's financial success makes the movie good or not. What I am saying is that it determines whether or not a franchise is viable. And right now, the DCU isn't viable, which is why it's being abandoned. And maybe I'm being super vague and not explaining why I would rather that they reboot or reset. The reason why is because you don't want confusion among your consumers about which universe you're in, or the fact that you're even in a different universe. Let's say you have Gal Gadot and Henry Cavill from a past universe, right? And you're saying this is a brand new universe, all the stuff that happened before doesn't exist. How many people in the general public do you believe would actually understand that the things that they saw in the past don't exist anymore, and the things that they're seeing now are from characters that are completely different but the same, or maybe the stuff that did happen in the past did happen? I know some comic book heads are saying, whoa, it happens in comics all the time. New 52, Rebirth. The average consumer is not a comic book fan. Those concepts are only unique to us. There's so many properties that me and you, the comic book fan, consume that other people don't consume like that. Most stories are linear. They don't go through all the multiverse avenues that we go through. If you're trying to sell something to somebody, it's best to confuse them as least as possible. Don't confuse the customer. I think that's the number one rule. Let's get to some positives. I mean, the first positive right off the bat is that James Gunn and Peter Safran have an 8 to 10 year plan. I mean, that in and of itself is a step in the right direction. I'm not saying that Zack Snyder didn't have a plan. I'm just saying that when universes don't have plans, they end up a mess, kind of like Star Wars. I'm really excited for the Superman movie. It's doing the thing that James Gunn does well, which is introduce a bunch of intricate characters in one movie and have them flesh out those relationships. But I'm sure that James Gunn is aware that we want a Superman story. These characters, I believe, may play a major role in the story, but it will still be Superman's story at the end of the day. We don't necessarily know who the villain is, but I'm actually hoping that it's someone like Brainiac, someone who's worthy of all the attention of all these heroes. And also, we don't even know if all these heroes will necessarily be suiting up. I'm sure that they will in some capacity, but who knows what that final climactic battle will be like. We don't know, so let's not stress about it until we see a trailer at least. And some of the other shows that he announced, such as the Green Lantern show that's coming to HBO Max, which is a buddy cop show with Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan, sounds fantastic. He describes it as kind of like a true detective thing with Green Lanterns. Interested in seeing what he does with Swamp Thing. I've never really seen him on the big screen. It's going to be a horror film. And we also have Waller, which I'm going to sound hypocritical when I say this, but it's Viola Davis. You don't throw away talent like that. Despite me wanting them to do a full reset, it doesn't mean I think that the shows will be bad. I just think that the shows will be bad for business, if that makes sense. And yeah, there's some other shows that I'm kind of trepidatious about. I don't really care for Booster Gold at all. In fact, I despise Booster Gold. The Paradise Lost show seems to be making the same mistake that a lot of other shows have made, where they make a show about something around a main character, but not about the main character. I'm not saying that a Themyscira story can be interesting, but I feel like you're putting the cart before the horse. Put out a Wonder Woman movie, and then make movies about the lore surrounding her. There's some things to be excited about and some things to be really trepidatious about. However, I can't really call it in terms of whether or not the DCU will be good or bad. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It means that us as fans are going to have to wait to see what the state of the DCU actually is.